Well, guys, welcome to this episode and as well as to this podcast. Today we're going to talk about marriage. Specifically, we're going to talk about what women want to learn or need to learn about the inner lives of men, and as well as what men want to learn about inner workings of women. Now, marriage is very important, and relationships could be complicated for a lot of people. We're made as relational beings by a relational God. Our God is a triune God, meaning one God in three persons. And so we learned that from the scriptures. We learned that also through research. And today I'm very blessed to have in this studio for you guys an interview and a conversation with people that I just met this weekend, but I actually met them before through their books, Shanti and Jeff. Thank you for being with us at this marriage conference and for agreeing to share your thoughts with our audience.
It's really a pleasure.
It's been so much fun. We've really enjoyed hanging out with you guys.
And so we want to get to know a little bit about where you guys come from. But first I wanted to let our audience know, most of you guys probably have seen these books somewhere, or you probably have read them. I know I have. When I was a younger person getting ready for marriage, trying to understand women. So I picked, of course, the one for men only, so that I can learn about women. And definitely there was a lot of insights, a lot of revelations that came into me. And then last year, as I was studying for the marriage series, and of course I was doing what every pastor does, is Googling statistics on marriages, something that we're going to talk about in the next episode. And I came across, I think your blog came up first, and I started to dive in deeper, and I was like, oh wait, I know this lady. I read her books. I didn't know she had marriage stuff too. And so I started to go and dive in deeper, and you have a lot of resources on your websites. I went through pretty much every resource for the leaders. I downloaded all of them. And start going through them. And a lot of my things that I used to say about marriage, I'm like, oh wait, that's not true, that's not true, that's not true. And so it was really a powerful impact. I mentioned today to our church, I prepared a whole sermon called Unnecessary Unhappiness in Marriage, based on your research. And I didn't preach that message though. I was like, you know what, I don't think it's fair, because it's really the whole message is just ripping off from what they studied. I was like, I think they need to come and teach that to our church. And so I'm really blessed that you guys were able to come and share to our congregation and to the marriage conference. But could you tell us a little bit how you started? How you started in this research about marriage and where this whole began for you?
You want to?
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in. Yeah, we have very different backgrounds than many people who are in kind of a relationship space or marriage space, because you're usually talking about a psychologist, right? Or maybe a pastor, a therapist, and we are so not that. We actually have analytical backgrounds, and Jeff is an attorney. I started out as an analyst on Wall Street. And had no idea that basically I was building up a skill set that God was going to do a right-hand turn, and I would use that in a very different way. And so we ended up, we say we're sort of a semi-confused husband and wife who ended up suddenly doing tons of social research and finding out all these fascinating things that we didn't know about each other.
Well, and our skill set basically fed into all of that. Yeah. You know, as a lawyer, I like to understand things and ask questions and try to turn the kind of facets a little different. And that's what we used all through this. And I have to say, I think I was the reason why we started down this path.
Stop.
Shanti was frankly just confused after 10 years of marriage with me, that she was like,
what
are all guys like him? And that kind of just started the ball rolling. And when we'd be out with couples, Shanti would ask questions.
I'd ask the other guy, like, okay, tell me how you're feeling. This actually, believe it or not, this whole thing started because I was writing a novel. And one of the main characters in the novel was a guy. And I realized, I don't know how to put thoughts in his head. Like, I had to say what my main character was thinking, right? I couldn't just say what he was doing, but I don't know what a guy would be thinking.
How many years have you guys been married now?
29.
29 years.
See, I didn't even hesitate.
You're good.
I got that right
You're
away.
Good. You did. Absolutely.
So here was the thing that was interesting. When we'd be out with these couples, and Shanti would ask the guy in the couple, and he would be saying some of the things that I had been trying to tell her. And the spouse in that couple, the wife, would look, and no matter how long they had been married, whether it was 6 months or 20 years, and she'd say, "Are you kidding me?" And me and the other guys would look at each other and go, "What is it you didn't know about this?" Because we assumed as guys that our wives or the women in our lives understand what's going on inside of us. And as a result, they're intentionally trying to make us crazy. But that's not the case.
The research that you guys did, this is not like a Facebook poll research. Can you tell us just before you guys hear about some of the things they're gonna share, I want you to know they didn't just Google this stuff or just did a Facebook post. Could you tell us a little bit about just the research, what goes into that, the amount of funds you guys also spend on that?
Yeah. So for 20 years, so we've been doing this social research for 20 years, and we've done 12 of these big studies. And the way that we describe them, the easiest way to describe it is that we just do tons and tons and tons of interviews with average people. Like I'll hit up the guy next to me on the airplane or whatever, just asking them questions. But then it transitions into, okay, we've heard a lot of things that's like, wow, really? And so then we do a big nationally
It
representative
creates
survey.
for us a hypothesis of something
create-
that we might not understand and we want to test out.
Yeah. And so we create a hypothesis. We say, I've heard this a lot. I think this is true. And so then we do a big nationally representative survey. And so that is across all ages, racial backgrounds, religious backgrounds, and this is nationally representative in the US. But then in some cases, we then take it globally. So like I've done the same kind of research in Mexico, for example, in Singapore, in England. And so to be able to just sort of go, we're trying to get universal truths here. And so that in order to get really robust data, it actually costs quite a bit of money. We've invested over $850,000 in the research over the last 20 years in order to be able to bring you the data and say, this isn't our opinion.
Well, and here's the other point, is that you can always run these surveys if you don't have the right questions, or if you've crafted the questions in such a way or designed them to get the answers you want. That's not an effective way to conduct research either. So the psychometrics, the way that you are designing your survey questions matters. And so for us, I'm a lawyer by training, she's an analyst by training. We had not been,
At the beginning
steeped
of
in
this.
survey design.
Yeah.
And what God did was he brought a partner for us during the first 10 of these.
Well, actually,
11?
just until the last one. So yeah, the first 11.
11 surveys, an individual who was a believer in the faith, and he felt that it was his calling to assist us. And he was a PhD statistician and the former head of survey design for the United States Census Bureau. So this is someone who knows what he's doing. He helped teach us, train us, and prevent us from asking some of the questions we really wanted to ask, because he'd just say, you can't ask it
You
that
gotta
way.
love accountability. It's
You
just,
can't.
it's like, but we learned a lot.
And now many books that you've written. So we want to dive into what we need to know about the inner lives of men. Men seem to be, I know a lot of times we think the women are hard to understand, but I think it's a lot harder to understand men. The Bible says for husbands to love their wives and for the wives to respect their husbands. And in your book, you highlight that men value respect more than love. Yeah. Why is that?
So the easiest way of explaining that, well, first, and let me just say, by the way, we are going to be making some generalizations here, okay? And there's always exceptions, right? Like if we say 80% of men felt that way, by definition, 20% didn't, Okay, so the key is to use this as a starting point. What matters to your husband? What matters to your boyfriend? Even what matters to your son, right? Like there's so many applications of this. And so one of the things that we found about the reason why, gosh, why does God say, husbands love your wives and wives respect your husbands, right? Like in Ephesians 5, like why that really clear distinction? It turns out, I think, it's because one of the things that we found over the years is that men and women tend to have two very different sets of primary insecurities running under the surface. And we tend to find statistically somewhere around 75 to 85% of women and 75 to 85% of men, the women's question tends to be, am I lovable? Men's question tends to be, am I able? So for women, we tend to question, am I lovable? Am I special? Am I worthy of being loved for who I am on the inside? Well, guess what? A husband showing love to his wife, that answers that question really well. But men's question tends to be different, where it's not, am I lovable? It's, am I able? Do I measure up? Am I any good at what I do on the outside?
Not on the inside.
Not necessarily. And so it's like this thing I did for my wife, like, I want to be a great husband. I want to be a great dad. Like I want her to see that I'm, doing well as a father, for example. But I'm really not sure I know what I'm doing. And I'm hoping nobody finds out. And there's this deep self-doubt about, are they any good at what they do? And so, hey, guess what? A wife showing her husband how much I appreciate you, how much I respect you.
But you also have a very particular way that a wife can do that. Because I would assume that knowing this, a wife should just come to her husband and say, I respect you. But you're saying that's not really...
I tried that. So I'm the guinea pig, usually in a lot of these things, as she's learning some of this stuff. And she, for about 2 weeks...
Because I'll interrupt you. When it comes to wives, though, I know, hearing this information, I know that coming to my wife and telling her, I love you, solves the problem.
Right.
And then also reminding her, like you even say, that letting her know that I will choose you again. I'm happy to be married to you.
Yes.
And especially in the conflict, giving her a hug pretty much solves the problem in this regard. So you would think that a wife would come to her husband and say, hey, I respect you. I honor you. You're a man of God will solve that, but it does not.
It actually doesn't. We're looking for some magic words, and those aren't it. So for the longest time, when Shanti would try to find what are the words that hit you, Jeff, and she would try them out, like, I so respect you. And I'd go, okay, I know, I think I get what you're trying to do, but those words don't kind of hit me the same way as I love you does for her.
So we did, I went on a quest. I'm like, doggone it, I'm going to figure out what you can say to your husband that has that same impact that I love you does. And believe it or not, we found it, and it is the words, thank you. Thank you. For most men, I can't remember the number, it was something like 87%, can't remember the number right this second. But for most men, hearing thank you has the same emotional impact on him that I love you tends to do on women, with women, because it's speaking directly to that insecurity, right? That question where it's saying, I noticed what you did. That's the first thing, right? I noticed this thing you did on the outside. I noticed this thing you did with our kids as a dad, for example, and it was good. And I appreciate it. And this saying thank you has all of those notes to it.
If I can jump in,
Please.
One of the things about when Shanti wrote the book, the brilliance of it in my mind was that the things she was sharing from having pulled out of guys and able to write down in the book were things that us guys, why we always say, guys, we're just simple. But what we're actually saying is, I don't know how to explain what's inside of me. So I'm just going to say I'm just simple. But the fact of the matter is, she was able to find words for the things that me and other guys were feeling all the time, but couldn't articulate to a woman in a way that a woman could understand it. And so I would have guys come up to me all the time and say, I can't believe what your wife did. I thought it was just me. Because we as guys, we don't sit around generally talking about our inner lives and feelings. We might talk about being depressed or discouraged at work or something like that, but it's hard to get even down below that as to why am I discouraged at work? Why am I depressed? Why do I feel less than in my marriage? And all of a sudden there were words for it. And I could say, that's me. I really do. I need this. And then she gave the women simple steps and prescriptions to take to what hits the guy the same way I love you does for her.
You know, I remember about 2 years into our marriage, and my wife worked at the local dealership. And I took a whole Saturday to pretty much, my love language is acts of service. I love to do stuff, not feel, go for a walk. That's not the way I feel loved. I love to do stuff. So I took my wife's car without her knowing, and I swapped from my car. I detailed her car myself. Then I brought my car back. I let her clean the house. I mean, I did everything in the house. I mowed the lawn, washed the dishes. I did everything. And so I'm not expecting worship. At least what Sarah did to Abraham, you know, Lord. At least, you know, be called Lord or something, you know, like.
Yeah, sure.
Or I spent about 8 hours that day to I just wanted her to at least, I don't know, just get on her knees and worship God for a great husband that she had. My wife walked in, she didn't notice anything. She didn't even notice her car being washed and deep cleaned. She eats dinner, and I'm sitting, and I'm literally, I'm waiting for that. She's not saying anything bad, but I'm like, girl, you don't realize what I just did. I'm fishing and I feel bad. I'm fishing for a compliment. I'm waiting for that. And all she wanted to do is go for a walk in the park. Yeah. And I said, I'm not going to park with you. And she's like, why? I was like, I'm tired. She's like, why are you tired? What did you do all day? And that's when the straw broke the camel's back.
Right, I get it.
And I was like, I can't believe you didn't realize that. I'm like, and I did all of it for you. She's like, oh, okay. And so when I heard you mention that yesterday, I was like, babe, exactly. You know, all I needed was thank you. 8 hours of work. All I wanted is that thank you.
It was that awareness of what you had sacrificed.
Well, and this is, okay, so this is one of the things when we do marriage events, like what we did with you guys yesterday, one of the things that we often will drill into a little bit for the wives is to recognize that we naturally will say, I love you, right? Like it just sort of comes out of us, and we do things that we hope he'll find to be loving. And we don't realize that at the same time, we might be, you know, questioning, what did you do all day? Or we might be telling him what to do, or all these things that make him think you're saying you're not able. And all he wants in most cases is for you just to notice what he did for you. And so so that we can learn and sort of train ourselves to not just notice it, but to say thanks for that, and to acknowledge it, and because we do generally tend to notice some things, and we just don't think to say it, like it just doesn't come out
It's
naturally.
Like I'm also thinking about when that happened, I started to think about my wife. When I notice she dressed really beautiful, she's attractive, I have the thought, it never comes out of my mouth.
Yes, same exact thing.
And so when you were mentioning that yesterday, I was thinking about that. I'm like, so many times we're driving in the car and I'm just beholding her beauty. I just love her. Just don't say anything. I'm like, I feel it. The fact that I love her, she knows that I love her.
Right.
But the thing about it is but to vocalize it, this is where the miracle happens to her. She feels loved when it's vocalized versus when I'm feeling it.
So some numbers, interestingly. So one of the experiments that we did a number of years ago, one of the big studies, we asked people to do a series of things and to try a series of things over the course of 30 days. Like we were experimenting and sort of doing pre-post testing and figuring out what mattered. One of the things that we asked everybody at the beginning was, how often do you think you actually say these sort of affirming things, that you notice that she's beautiful, or that you notice that, he detailed the car or whatever? How often do you say thank you or whatever? And the average person, the average guess was, I think I say about 2 or 3 times a day. Okay, so that's what we tend to think about ourselves. Then we told them, as part of the experiment, they had to actually say it once a day at least. Like they had to, and log it, like, yes, I did. And so once people actually had to log it, they realized, oh my gosh, it's actually that I'm saying it out loud 2 to 3 times a week. Like we literally just don't verbalize these affirmations as often as we think we do.
I tell my wife all the time, I said, people's compliments are like gum to me. I chew it and I have to spit it out. But I'm like, your compliment is my bread. I'm like, I live off of that stuff.
Yeah.
And so
That's a great way of putting it.
And she has been such a great, now we matured. It's been, 12 years since that incident. And so where she acknowledges those things. And then also I'm trying to be more verbal with honoring her and speaking things that, I'm like, well, I don't want to feed the monster, like keep saying these nice things. She's going to want more. Appetite's going to grow. But
well, what we don't realize is that it's not the monster you think it is, because what's going on under the surface, and this, by the way, is a big misunderstanding with women about men, because we think you look so confident in yourself.
Yeah, you were mentioning
and
that
so
yesterday.
we think we're going to be feeding that big ego, and are you kidding me? He needs to be taken down a peg or two,
he needs
right?
to humble himself.
And to humble himself, and my job is to do it, right? And instead, actually what we tell women now, whether I'm doing a women's event or the books or a marriage event, is to say, you've got to realize he doesn't have an ego the way you think. He has a deep insecurity under the surface. And there's this longing to know that he's done well for you. And so that changes everything when you stop thinking of it as he's so confident and realize that's just a mask. And that instead there is this deep desire to know that he's pleased you.
And you mentioned that yesterday, that men a lot of times have this almost like an imposter syndrome. We appear one way.
Yeah. It was something, I think it was 85% of men, depending on the survey, because there were several different surveys, but it circled around that number. But 85% in general of men feel this
self-doubt.
Feel this level of self-doubt. Now, there are some that apparently don't, but this is very, very common.
And so the wife can help by thanking him, acknowledging him for what he does or what he do. Now, the woman's insecurity, Jeff, what does that look like? How different is that compared to men's insecurity?
This one was fascinating because we wrote the book for men only, about, we call it a straightforward guide to the inner lives of women. And I didn't think that there was going to be any real surprise in this area, because I have heard, and most of us have heard, if you watch television any length or any amount, that it's important for women to hear, I love you, from their husband, that they want to feel loved.
So that's not a surprise.
That's not a big surprise to most guys. What was the surprise was how easy it is for her to not feel loved. So even if you were in a great relationship, a great marriage, and the question doesn't really, from a guy's standpoint, come up in my mind. If Shanti and I are having a disagreement of some sort, I don't kind of think, well, maybe I think she's displeased with me at the moment, but I don't question her love for me. For women, I guess the numbers were 82%. When you have certain occurrences in your relationship.
The conflict, the emotional, the feeling like he's displeased.
All of a sudden, this insecurity inside her, that one that Shanti talked about at the beginning, am I lovable for who I am on the inside? All of a sudden, while that may be dormant most of the time, it kind of moves from the back part of the brain to the front part. And what that does is create a level of discomfort among the woman, in the woman. And that level of discomfort comes out sometimes in actions where for us guys, we find could be, or it could be something like she's crying. And I don't know what to do with this. Everything seemed fine, and now all of a sudden this. So we as guys tend to throw up our hands and say, I'll never understand women. I'll never figure them out. And so we kind of give ourselves an out. We say they're so complicated. It's such a complex issue. So therefore, why bother? I'm just going to have to live with it. Instead of, let's say that your car is doing something unusual. It sounds something in the engine. If you have any sort of mechanical aptitude at all, you look at it and you go, I'm going to solve this. I've got to figure this out, or I'll take it to someone who does. We do that with lots of other things in our lives, but with our wives and with women, we tend to just go, I'm never gonna get it, so why bother? But what we found from the research is we can get it. We can learn how they're wired and then what to do about it. So in those cases where she has this, it's easy for her to feel unloved because of some disagreement, because of something that has occurred in the family. What we need to do is simply reassure her of our love. And now there's lots of different steps and different ways that you can do that.
One of the ways that you guys keep highlighting, first time I read this, it made sense because my wife would ask me this question. And this was the question she would ask me. If you had a chance, would you marry me again? And I always told her, what a dumb question.
Right, huh?
I said, I already made that mind 13 years ago, or 10 years ago. And I was like, why do you keep asking? I was like, I would tell you if I changed my mind. I didn't. So to me, it just felt like, why are we asking? Let's just move forward. Let's not look. And when I read that in a study, how important that is, that they need to be, and I want you to unpack that thought of how to help women's insecurity to feel more loved. How do we do that? How do we answer that question?
Why don't you go ahead?
Well,
I'll let a woman answer that
well,
one.
here's actually what's going on. Okay, so this is actually unpacking it for that 82% of women. Here's actually what's happening is that you think as a guy that the act of getting married, it's like, okay, we're good, right? Like she knows she's permanently loved. I feel permanently loved. Let's move on to the next.
If anything changes,
the thing is,
I'll tell
you. It's not that I didn't stop loving her.
Right.
And so here's what often, because that is how you feel, right? Like, I don't question whether my wife loves me. That's pretty common amongst men. And you don't realize there is no switch in a woman's brain that gets flipped to the, oh, now I feel permanently loved position. Because her question, that am I lovable question, that doesn't go away just because you got married any more than your question of am I able goes away just because you're a fantastic salesman or whatever. Those questions are deep down inside. You could even say, if I am putting on my Bible reading hat, okay? If I'm doing women's leadership programs, I don't go necessarily into the Bible reading, but if I'm putting my Bible reading hat on, and I look at what God says when Adam and Eve are kicked out of the garden, and he says, this is what you're going to be living with from now on. Look at what he says the insecurities are. For the men, he says, you are going to feel like you are toiling the ground by the sweat of your brow, but that the thorns and thistles are always rising up against you. You're always going to feel and wonder,
so you're going to try. You're going to do, but it's not good enough.
But it may not feel good enough. And what's hers? Hers is you are always going to feel that your desire is for your husband and you're never sure of his love for you. And so the issue for most women, again, it's not 100%, but for most women, that question, am I lovable, doesn't go away. In marriage, it morphs to, would he choose me all over again? Am I really lovable? Does he really love me? Which is why many men have had their wife come up and say, do you really love me? And he's like, what? Of course I do, right? That right there, just like yours is, both insecurities, these are fantastic opportunities. Understanding this inner need in your spouse is a fantastic opportunity to speak to the deep places in the heart and make your spouse feel incredibly cared for.
So if a woman says to a man, thank you, to help calm down his insecurity,
yes,
what can a man say to a woman to help her with her insecurity?
It is, I love you. I'm going nowhere. We're in this together.
And I'm so glad I married you.
Exactly. So here's an interesting thing. As Shanti was sharing that about the Genesis account, I was reminded of a podcast that I had listened to over the last 6 months to a year. And they were talking about this longitudinal study that Harvard University has been conducting since the 1930s of Harvard graduates. Not all Harvard graduates, but a certain cohort. And over the last 90 years, they've been interviewing these people, these graduates of Harvard University for, every 5 years. And they would ask them certain questions. Well, they were at this one point asking these 80-year-olds, men and women, who had graduated, and they'd now built up, 60 years of a relationship, questioning, talking with these people. And they asked the men, now in their 80s, if there was one thing that you say that you would have done differently, you would have liked to have done differently over the course of your life, what would it have been? Almost all of them said, I wish I would have been less concerned about my career and how I was doing things. They asked the women what was the one thing, and they said, I wish I would have cared less about what other people were thinking about me. For the men, it was what they were going to do. For the women, it was, am I lovable? And it's in us as humans. It's the way God wired us, or as a result of the curse. But it's there.
What about when it comes to a space? Man, if Shanti, you can help us to understand, is there some kind of brain damage when it comes to men and women, when it comes to us wanting to run and disconnect when things get too intense in a conflict?
Yes.
Can I share what we would often do just from our own personal life?
Sure, absolutely.
We're having that heated moment of discussion. Shanti thinks relatively faster than me, so she can verbalize and articulate what's going on inside of her. For me, she'd say, so what are you thinking? And I'd say, I don't know.
And I'm like, how can you not know what you're thinking?
And all I know is I'm upset inside here, but I can't find the words to tell you what's going on inside here. So as a result, as a self-protective measure for me, I withdraw. I don't want to talk. So she is talking to my back as I'm walking away in frustration because I can't communicate. I want to, but I can't, so I leave.
So this is, okay, so here's what's going on.
You just said what a lot of men are feeling.
Yes. Well,
Mic drop.
This is, and I can't remember the numbers, we have a chapter about that, but it is 80-something%. It's a pretty high number. And here's basically what's going on realistically in most men's brains, again, not all, but in most men's brains, there's actually a different brain structure. And I spent quite a bit of time talking to neuroscientists and trying to understand what they were telling me because it's very complex. And so this is an oversimplification. But in general, For the female brain, the way that God wired us is we have a lot of connections between the hemispheres of the brain, in particular to the verbal centers. And so what that does is it makes it very common amongst women, not all, but very common, that when we're in the middle of a conflict and what's going on, we're processing verbally. We're trying to think things through by talking it through. Okay, because that's how we try to figure out what's going on and what we're feeling,
And trying to understand yourself.
and trying to understand ourselves, and trying to understand our spouse. And it's literally because of the structure of our brain that is a very, very common dynamic, and it helps us to work it through. For men, it turns out it's exactly the opposite. I mean, really, it's an astounding thing that the human race survived, if you think about it, right? And so it turns out for the male brain that actually a lot of the connections are within the hemispheres rather than across the hemispheres. And so what happens in, again, not all, but many men's brains is they actually have to pull away and process internally. That's the way that the male brain is generally wired, to have to sort of, instead of thinking things through by talking them through, men tend to go underground. And they do this internal processing, and it's kind of like an internal chess match. You know how you're playing chess and you have to think like, if I do this, then this has to happen over here, you know? And so men will go process internally. Sometimes that can happen for days. And then he's able to come back and talk about it. And so when Jeff is getting away and I'm talking to his back, it looks uncaring to me.
I mean, it does.
It looks like you don't care. And what is happening is often the reverse. He cares. He wants to be able to engage. And he knows there is no way that I can talk this through, and I'm going to say something wrong, and I need to figure out what I'm feeling right now because I love you and I don't want to like damage the relationship. And there's this urgency of feeling like the need to get space so I can process this and then come back and talk about it well. But when we're like talk, trying to get him to talk, we're actually preventing exactly what we want, which is for him to come back and be able to talk about it.
What do we do?
So yeah, there are a number of things.
There is a way to work this.
One of the things, though, that was so encouraging to me as a guy when I heard this, because again, I'm not sitting around with a bunch of dudes and saying, so do you take time to process when you and your wife are fighting? You just don't talk about these things. Instead, I thought I was defective. I thought that there was something wrong with me.
That you couldn't process verbally.
I couldn't process these things the way she can. And I thought there's just something wrong. And it was, it's that imposter complex. It's insecurity. I wasn't good at it. So therefore,
and some wives sometimes will even make the man say, why can't she do it? Why can't she
exactly.
do it? Don't love me. Why? Don't walk away.
So what we have to do is work with what we got. And what we got is the fact that she knows that I need space. I need time to work this through. But she also, what I know about her, is that she's going to feel unloved.
As he walks
walking away. And that's going to hurt. So what I have to do is something along the lines of this. And I'm going to say, when I say this, I'm confident in what I'm saying because we tested this on the survey and it was
95%
of women said that if my husband, boyfriend will do something like this, it will help immensely. And so we're in the middle of this disagreement. I'm feeling stirred up, but I can't articulate why or what we need to do or how I need to handle it. So instead, if I can say something like, Shanti, I'm so upset right now, and I got to get some space. I got to go think this through, but I want you to know we're okay.
Wow.
Whew. And then that allows for me and my verbally processing brain to know, okay, we're okay. That's what stirred up the most. And we'll be able to come back and talk about it. Now, that is the caveat. You do actually have to come back at some point.
If one woman said,
preferably not after 3
one woman
days.
said, if I have to chase him down after 2 days, all that goodwill is out the window.
I remember our first fight that I will never forget for the rest of my life. It was a year and a half into our marriage, and I don't even remember how the fight started. I know it started about 2 p.m. I was at church. My wife already was at home, or it was over a text message, which those are the worst fights, over a text message. And I got home, and we already were giving cold shoulders, and we were so immature in our first year of marriage. And usually by 7 p.m. already, I'm usually considering the possibility I could be wrong, because I love my sleep. And so, but this time I was stubborn, and I remember I'm like, no, I'm gonna prove this woman right, and she's gonna have to agree that she's wrong. And so 9 p.m. comes, and and she's talking, and now I'm defensive, and then about 9:30 we're already going to sleep, and then we have this silence. Both of us are in the same bed, and then turn around, and then I don't want to give her the pleasure of even hearing my breathing. So I'm trying to I don't want her to know even I'm alive. So and then of course she would hit me. Are you there? Mm-hmm. And what happened is that I on accident fell asleep. I was so emotionally exhausted. I didn't know I'm capable of falling asleep. I was so tired that around 10:30 I fell asleep. So I wake up I thought my rib was broken. It turns out that I wake up, and my wife, she wakes me up. She didn't try to assault me or anything. She just woke me up. And now for the rest of the 2 hours, we're arguing how I was able to fall asleep, when in reality, she's so hurt, and you don't care about... We forgot about the argument now. The argument is about how I responded. And so we finally came to the mutual agreement. We didn't solve it, this was my first experience of going to sleep mad. But how we resolved it is we said, hey, we're so on the edge right now. Let's just go to sleep, and tomorrow morning we'll wake up and we'll go and let's hear each other out. So we went to sleep. The next day we went to Starbucks. And then we both apologized, and we came to the conclusion. Till this day, I don't remember what the argument was about. But that needing of space, if I was given the permission to have space without feeling like I don't care, because that's what I felt. And secondly, if I would have also assured her instead of falling asleep, I wouldn't get my ribs fractured.
Well, believe it or not, research scientists, neuroscientists, have actually studied the use of energy in the brain, and have found that, for example, in these emotional conflicts, that literally the process of trying to process, it makes us exhausted because our brain is working at this intense speed. It's just using a lot of extra energy. So believe it or not, that's actually a physiological response that you had.
Well, in the conclusion, I do want to address the difference in men and women when it comes to sex.
Okay, yep.
So from your research, what did you find out about men when it comes to how different they are from women, and what do women need to know?
So, okay, we literally just finished a research project and a brand new book on this topic. And so it's even beyond what we have in these books. Although we started there and then we just added to it. And so, okay, can I just give you a couple of the most interesting pieces of the puzzle?
Of course, please.
One of the most important misunderstandings that we need to cover right up front is that we women misunderstand what physical intimacy means to our husbands often. And now again, this is not 100%, right? But this, I can't remember what the numbers were, but it was a pretty high percentage of the men. And here's basically the misunderstanding. We as wives think of physical intimacy in our marriage as being primarily a physical need for him. That's kind of the category that we put it in. It's a physical need. It's a physical urge. When you've been running around with little kids all day, sleep seems like a physical need, right? And when we asked the men, tell me, what's the importance of this in your life? what we heard from the men had absolutely nothing to do with the physical, absolutely nothing. What we kept hearing from them was this enormous emotional need that they couldn't really get met any other way. And it's the need that every man has to feel that his wife desires him and that she wants him. And if a man feels that his wife desires him, it gives him this sense of confidence, right? This sense of well-being in all the other areas of his life, not just in the bedroom. And so, and if he doesn't feel desired, it's like the reverse, almost this, I must be so undesirable, I can't compete with her pillow, right? And so for a lot of women, that's our big misunderstanding. For men, do you want me to keep going? Okay.
Keep going.
For the misunderstanding that men often have is actually this, and this is, we leaned into this a lot in our most recent research. For most men, and this is statistically, this was, I want to say it was around 80%. I'm not remembering the number exactly right now, but somewhere in that ballpark. For most men, there is a sense about their wives, I should say, that there's something wrong here because, like, I want her. Why doesn't she want me in the same way that I want her? And it's because, honestly, we misunderstand that there are actually different types of desire and different types of physiology around sexual desire. And most of us, especially men, we see like the Hollywood version of where you feel like this sense of hunger and you rip each other's clothes off and, you go at it. And you think, that's not what it looks like in my house. Something's wrong, like something's broken. I'm not desirable because my wife doesn't do that to me.
And for the most part, what we found is a lot of women, while that Hollywood image there, they're questioning themselves because I don't feel the way those women in the movies do. Something must be wrong with me. So they're getting it from a cultural, kind of, feeling that they're less than.
So basically, both the husband and the wife often think the wife is broken. Okay. And so the misunderstanding here, again, this is not everyone. This is again in the 80% range. I'd have to look at the numbers. But what's actually happening often is there's two different types of desire. And what you see in Hollywood, the I'm hungry for you kind of desire, you could call that initiating desire. And that desire, that feeling is you feel desire and you do something about it. Okay. But you pursue it. But there's a completely different type of desire, and it's called receptive desire. And 73% of women have receptive desire, where the physiology is exactly the opposite. And instead, someone with receptive desire, you don't feel that sense of desire up front. You choose to get engaged with your spouse in that way. You choose to try to begin some intimate, because you love them, as you start an intimate process. And as your physiology starts being stimulated, now assuming that this is a relationship of goodwill, etc., okay? But as your physiology starts getting stimulated, then the person with receptive desire then eventually starts feeling that sense of hunger desire that their spouse may have felt 10 minutes ago. And so that's the misunderstanding that often happens with husbands, which is it has nothing to do with you think it's that she doesn't want you. That is not the issue at all. She literally has a different physiology than you. And so here's the key for a lot of husbands is recognize she's making a decision to get engaged with you, okay? And she'll know it's going to be good and she loves you and, it'll her physiology will be stimulated. But she's making a decision. Guess what she's making the decision based on? how she feels about you and the relationship the rest of the day. And so that is why the old joke is, sex begins in the kitchen, right? Like, it's how you treat your wife and the closeness that she feels with you at other times during the day is usually what she's making the decision based on. And so if you're not close, if you haven't talked to her, if you haven't engaged, she's not feeling close, and she's not gonna be as excited about making that decision later. Now, I need to say up front, because we'd spent a lot of time and money on this research project, that is the majority of women. Like I said, 73% of women. But there's actually the opposite, where actually there is a cohort of women who are the initiating desire. I think it was almost 10. I think it was actually almost 24% were higher desire.
Okay.
But I think it was 9% or 10% that were the initiating desire as well. And some men aren't the initiating desire. Some men are that receptive desire. So
Could
there
you
are
also
exceptions.
just briefly touch on men being visual?
Sure.
How that comes pretty much naturally, and they have to pretty much fight not to?
Yes.
This is honestly, if I can be honest, this is the most controversial topic that Shanti and I deal with.
Yeah. Well, it's controversial, and here's the reason. I'll just be really honest, is because men and women's brains are wired so differently that women don't understand it. And so here's
Even the way you were talking about physical intimacy, I'm as a man listening to it, I was like, Lord, that's messed up. Why did you allow that? Like it's almost like God on purpose allowed somebody to be completely opposite of us, so to challenge us.
so that for a husband, for example, think about one of the reasons perhaps why. If you are a husband who is desiring to be connected intimately with your wife, and yet she's hanging back because you don't listen to her, guess what? It's an incentive to listen to her. It's an incentive to love her like the way that you're supposed to. And so it's definitely different.
It
but
challenges us to
It
need the Lord.
challenges us to try to figure out what the other needs. But in terms of the visual thing, here is the biggest misunderstandings, the biggest thing that a lot of women don't recognize about men, and vice versa. So it turns out that the way that the male and female brains, again, tend to be wired, there's actually a function in the male brain that doesn't exist in the female brain, okay? And it has to do with visual stimulation for like sexual images, for example. And so what happens when a man sees a woman, for example, or who's, let's just say you see an image in a movie of a woman who's not dressed in very much. you see some sort of an image like that. What happens in the male brain is there's a part of the brain called the nucleus accumbens, and it's the part of the brain, it's in the midbrain, so it's not the thinking centers, it's sort of back here, and it's the part of the brain that lights up when you are hungry and you haven't eaten all day. And so let's just say you walk into the room and you see food and you're like, whoa, I want that. It's not a thought, it's a biological pull. That's the nucleus accumbens lighting up, okay? And so it's this biological response. When a guy sees a woman who is sort of presenting a sexual image of some kind, his nucleus accumbens lights up and he automatically has a draw to want to look at that image. And then a millisecond later, so that's back here, a millisecond later, his cortical centers, the thinking centers at the front of the brain, they then kick in and he goes, no, don't. Like honor your wife or
Honor God.
or honor God or honor that other woman or whatever. And so he chooses to sort of pull that thought down. So there's a little bit of an intra-brain war, okay? Temptation, choice. Temptation, choice, okay? And so the temptations we face aren't sins, right? It's what we choose to do with them, with anything, okay? So you have a temptation and a choice, and it's an intra-brain war, okay? For the female brain, what happens when...
This is really disappointing for a lot of guys who spend a lot of time at the gym
I'm just going to tell you honestly what happens for the female brain. When she sees the equivalent image of an attractive man, her nucleus accumbens stays dark. And instead, what lights up from the beginning is the cortical centers. And she thinks to herself, huh, he's an attractive man. And that's kind of it. There's not this intra-brain war. And so she, for most women, now this is not all, but for most women, they literally have never experienced that temptation choice with this particular issue. Other things, sure. Like, I really shouldn't have eaten that lava cake that you fed us at lunch today. However, but that's an example with this visual thing. Women haven't experienced it, so we don't know that men do. And men don't realize that for women, it's different. So they think that woman at the office that wears those tight outfits or whatever, she knows exactly what she's doing. Actually, no, she doesn't. She just knows she looks attractive. She doesn't know that there's this intrabrain war. And so this is one of the reasons, I think, why when you look at what God talks about in the Bible of things like taking every thought captive out of reverence for Christ, for example, that there are things that all of us have to do that with. But for wives, it is so important for us to recognize that this is an issue that our men are facing every day in this culture. And I would want to know that. Some women don't want to know this. They're like mad that I talk about this. But I think if you love your husband and you want to support him, to be aware that this is there, and candidly, as a mom, I am like a mama bear about this. I'm so glad I knew this about our son, so we could be right on top of like, okay, we're going to have a filter on the internet and all this other kind of stuff.
Can I share?
Because when I first time read about this in your book when I was a young man, I just became freed, I think about 16 something from pornography. I was addicted to pornography, and that temptation would still be there. And sometimes the idea of being tempted made me realize, oh my goodness, I'm a pervert. Because when I was first like struggling with an addiction, I knew I was a pervert. Because when you're addicted, no matter, it's just bad. But then when the temptation was there, and I was like, what is wrong with me? And so I would pray, I said, God, deliver me from the temptation. And then when I remember I came across your chapter on that, and I was like, oh, wait, I have a brain problem.
It's my brain.
Yeah, and I'm like, wait, so this doesn't, I just need to, first of all, temptation is not a sin. And you mentioned that in your book, and I was like, okay, so that means pretty much I need to now turn my eyes away. I need to not feel like just because I saw that or that came across me that I committed sin. No, now I have the opportunity, like you said, make a choice. And that was so liberating.
I'm so glad.
Well, and the thing is, what Shanti has been able to communicate with all of these things is that we're all in need of compassion from others. We had talked about this, and we were doing a Q&A at a church. This was many years ago. And one woman stood up and said, I read that part in your book about the visual nature of men, and I realized I could never trust my husband again. And there was just this
and you saw all the men just go, oh.
And she said, if he has these thoughts that are running through his head, I can never trust him. And so Shanti, it was just God's wisdom, said to her, do you have a son by any chance? And the woman said, yes. And she said, when your son is married, would you want his wife to say the same things about him? And it was, oh, no. And we're not saying that we're giving men license to say it's all okay, it's just boys being boys. It's not
hence the
that.
choice.
Hence
You are
the choice.
called to make
That's
that
good.
choice.
That's
Right. Job said he makes a covenant with his eyes.
And the key is, for me, my heart is to help women understand men and how to love their men well. And the key for this is such a big part of so many men's experience day to day. And many wives have no clue about it. And they don't realize how much their husband is trying to honor them. And so if a husband is struggling and yet is trying to make the good choice, the appropriate response is gratitude, not condemnation, right? That he's trying to work on this in this culture, even if he doesn't always succeed. And that can be hurtful. But it needs to be expected that he is going to be. We are called to this. We are called to purity by our God. And so for all of us, we have these choices that we have to make. And yet I want and I hope and I pray that what this leads to for women is to have a sense of compassion and gratitude and closeness with their husband, where he feels like he can raise these issues and ask for prayer and say, can we put that filter back on the internet, without feeling like she's going to think that he's a pervert.
You guys were so generous with your time and sharing these things. I think this is going to help a lot of people. And the Bible says we shall know the truth and the truth will set us free. Sometimes it's that ignorance, not knowing. We love, we care, we just don't know. And when we begin to know this information, it begins to, now we have a choice. We still, that doesn't automatically make us good husbands or wives, but it gives us the proper tools. And I think learning all of this, and me being married now for really only 13 years, it made me realize the need for the Holy Spirit. And when I read the fruit of the Holy Spirit and I'm like, man, that's exactly what marriage is, a great opportunity for the Holy Spirit to develop that. One time I was, this whole idea of hugging my wife. I'm not a big hugger. I'm not a very emotional like that. I thought I was a hugger when we were dating. So when we got married, just kind of forget. And so I would put reminders of my wife.
That's so
today.
good.
Yeah.
That's good.
But then I just still would forget. And the whole flowers and, you don't tell me that you love me. My wife would kind of remind me about that. And I just felt like man, everything I do is just never enough. And one day I remember I walked into our garage. I still remember this prayer, and I said, Lord, I'm tired of trying to be a good husband. I just feel like I'll never be good enough. And I remember I told the Holy Spirit, I said, Holy Spirit, I'm going to quit trying to be a good husband. And I'm going to focus on you to help me. And also I'm going to train in godliness, in long suffering, kindness, compassion, focus more on you. And I started to experience Holy Spirit reminding me, giving me the grace. Hey, Vlad, there's Alberson. They have good flowers. Go get some flowers. Hey, give her a hug for a little bit longer. And I started to notice that the transformation it's almost like God was far more interested to develop me as a Christian man, and that spilled into a marriage, because I cannot be a good Christian without being a good husband to my wife. And that takes a form of death to self, and then that takes a form of trusting in the Holy Spirit. People who think they can do it without the Holy Spirit, I sometimes don't know how they can do that, because we're so opposites. And if somebody wants to learn more about your ministry and these two wonderful books and a lot of other books, where they can find more information.
So the easiest thing, if you're interested in the research, if you're interested in the books, or if you're interested in our blog, we have a weekly blog. We spend a lot of time and effort and money creating and equipping blog each week with this kind of information. Just go to shanti.com, SHAUNTI.com, and you can see all of it there.
And I will say, we love sharing this like we did with you all.
Oh yeah,
in
doing
the
marriage
in the
events
marriage
and
conference.
that kind of thing.
It really is just one of the most. It restores my faith in the humanity, because so many times we see on social media, we hear in the media, all of these things of how much we dislike each other as people. When we are sitting and meeting, we'd never met you before up until this weekend. This is the hope for our world. It's the people that we get to engage with, and we get to see that weekend after weekend around the country, and it's just magnificent.
Thank you. So guys, I hope that you were encouraged, inspired, challenged, and maybe a little bit angry. unhappy, but this is why we need the Lord. And I hope that you take advantage of these resources. All of that information will be pinned right below this video. I promise you it will be life-changing, because as you grow in understanding, you will also have an opportunity to grow in love. And God wants our marriages to be better. God wants our relationships to be better. And it's really important that we understand, not assume that the person that you're loving is exactly like you, but they need to be like. It's kind of like this, if you go to Russia or Ukraine, for example, and you're speaking English, you have all the right intentions, but people will not understand you. Why? Because you're speaking a different language. So think of the opposite sex in generally, they're speaking a different language. So you want to learn that language so you can have the best communication with them, loving communication. And so God bless you. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and let us know in the comments what stood out to you and what was the most surprising difference that you learned from this interview. Until next time.